going into the meet the person of God, and that is an experience which is beyond any other that I've ever had. I could never have entered into that in the state I was in. But God began to change me, prepare me in all those things in the soaking room so that I could get to that place where I was able to meet him face to face. Now, I'd met God in many different ways, but there's a difference in engaging the presence of God than engaging the person of God. Metamorphosis is a process that produces transformation. Not only do things get removed, but things also get changed, added to enable us to go into deeper levels of intimacy. So we have the ability to live in multidimensional realms in the fullness of our eternal nature and identity. An example in nature of metamorphosis is the transformation of a tadpole into a frog. It hatches from spawn, begins a life restricted to living in water, breathing through gills. But that's not God's intention for it. That's just the beginning. The tadpole eventually loses its gills and tail, develops legs, a new respiratory system. So as a frog, it can be free from its restrictions and has the new ability to live in the dual realms of water and land. A butterfly has a similar process of restriction in the chrysalis and change to bring it into a butterfly from a caterpillar, which is restricted to crawling on the earth, whereas a butterfly is free to fly. These are symbolic of the change and transformation that's needed. We also go through a similar transformation that removes, adds, and gives us restored abilities. Now, many times in the Bible, you'll find that characters are placed in a place of restriction to prepare them for their destiny. Now, sometimes people really struggle with that. They find it really difficult to be restricted. They think God is putting that restriction on them in a negative way. It is a positive thing when God places us in a position that brings about the change and transformation that's needed in our lives. Some of the examples of that, Jacob under Laban, where he was looking to receive his wife, and there was all these conditions put on him and tricks and everything else, but it produced character in him. Moses in the wilderness. He was called, but lived in the wilderness until he was able to take his position after he had matured. David in Adullam's cave, called for the kingdom, but he's in this place with a group of misfits. But God used that. Jeremiah, who was in anguish of soul, but came out of that into a place of fulfilling his destiny. And then Joseph and Esther, they were also prepared. Joseph was prepared in the pit. His brothers threw him in the pit. Now, how difficult must have that been? In slavery, in stewardship, and in prison, the prison of obscurity, until the time was right when his dreams and destiny would be fulfilled. Joseph, who was in his father's house, was never going to fulfill his destiny. It was Joseph who'd gone through the process of change and transformation, who grew, who matured, who would end up being full-time in leadership in Egypt in a way that was beyond what we would have thought possible, but God prepared him and took him through seemingly injustice and different situations which so challenged him, and yet he remained humble through those situations. Again, Esther went through 12 months of preparation before she could come before the king. Now, that was so difficult. I've engaged Esther in the spirit. I've engaged her as cloud of witnesses. I've engaged her, asking her, what was it like? And she said, I didn't want to be prepared to go and see the king. That was not something a young Jewish girl would have ever wanted to be, a concubine of a king, a foreign king. But God had a purpose for Esther that would bring about the salvation of her people. So it's really important that we don't just look at the external circumstances that are of our life and think, this is terrible. How can I get out of this? We need to understand that sometimes places of restriction are the places of greatest transformation. So for our soul to be prepared, there needs to be an identification of the things in our lives which are hindrances, coping mechanisms, defense mechanisms, trauma, and all of that leads us to where we come to a place of surrender, We surrender our independence, where we learn to trust the Father for our provision, protection, direction in our life. We're no longer going to do it by the DIY tree path.
This is an excerpt from Mike's current teaching series, Restoring First Love. Get the full-length videos every month only at eg.freedomark.org/first-love.
Our spirits, souls, and bodies get realigned and brought into union and oneness with each other and God. The identification of our false identity and any works and performance-based orientation gives us the opportunity to find our true origin and redemptive gifts. There's preparation for glorious sonship in restored first love, and creation is longing and waiting for the revealing of the sons of God, for the revealing of our true nature and how that can bring freedom to the whole of creation. So the soaking room experiences began to engage my body. They began to engage my soul, to prepare my body to radiate glory, and my soul to be operating in light. So this soaking begins to realign the frequencies of our being to restore resonance with God, with our true identity, harmony, balance to our whole being. We experience the sound and light frequencies of glory, God's nature, for transfiguration from one degree of glory to another. We don't stay the same, we increase in glory. So we increase in the full revelation of who we are and begin to express that and live from that place. Now, literally, excitation of light waves of specific frequencies causes our DNA photons to be energized and transformed. That light is God himself. We begin to be transfigured in light by God who is light. We become sons of light, living in physical and emotional harmony, health, and wholeness. And it all happens by the presence of God. And the symbols of the things in soaking are symbols of God's presence, of God himself. God as our Father is calling us to embrace the restrictions of transformation, to receive the freedom of our sonship. And it's so important that we receive that freedom so we can receive the full revelation of our eternal destiny to live trans and multi-dimensional existences, fully embracing all of the eternal characteristics of sonship that are our eternal identity, our true, authentic self. John 3:30 says, he must increase, but I must decrease. Now, I've heard that preached as if this is something that we need to beat ourselves up. We need to put ourselves on the cross every day. It doesn't mean that. He reveals in me what is like him. I embrace that. He takes away from me what is not like him. I embrace that. It's not something that I have to try and do. I got to decrease as if, I'm nobody and nothing, and this sort of false humility. No, this is allowing him to increase. Therefore, if he increases, then everything that's not like him falls away. So I learn to surrender, where I can present myself to him. I can be changed, conformed to sonship through this whole process by allowing him to soak me in his presence. So what is soaking? Soaking is to make or allow something to become thoroughly wet by immersing it in liquid. Dictionary definition. To immerse, to steep, to submerge, to submerse, to dip, to sink, to dunk, to bathe, to wet, to rinse, to douse, to marinate, to souse, to pickle. I mean, some really good words there. It's really important. If someone's got their mic on, can you just turn it off, please? Because it will interfere with the recording. To baptize in water, baptize in the Spirit, to baptize in fire, in which we are immersed in those things which bring about the changes. And I'll go into that in more detail in a future session when I look at the heat and how heat transforms us. But the soaking room is the place of preparation that has parallel heavenly encounters in the river of life, which is a river of energy, of spirit, and in the river of fire. God is a consuming fire. His love is a consuming fire. We can be baptized in the river of life and in the associated waterfalls that cascade down. We can be baptized in the river of fire. Engage the altars of fire. Engage the process. See, the river of life is spirit, energy, living water. It's not H2O, but the very essence of life encoded with the frequencies of God. God's essence. And when we're baptized into it, when we submerge ourselves into it, it begins to change and transform us. The sound of many waters. It says God's voice is like the sound of many waters. The sound of many waters are the creational frequencies of God's voice that will realign us to who God created us to be. So I encourage you right now just to close your eyes, get comfortable, begin to relax, to focus your thinking on God. Focus your thinking on God's love, grace, mercy for you. Focus your breathing by slowing down. Breathe in more slowly, breathe in more deeply. And as you're breathing in the unconditional love of the Father. You're breathing in life. You're breathing in joy and peace. And as you breathe it in, just receive. Let it flow into your being. Whether you feel it or sense it, just let it flow. Continue to be still. Breathe in and breathe out slowly. Breathe in slowly and breathe out slowly. Slow everything down and totally relax. Just become mindful that you're cocooned right now in God's presence. As you are still, He is cocooning you in love. He's loving on you. Consciously invite love, invite joy, invite peace to come upon you, to flow in you, to flow through you, to create an atmosphere of rest around you that you are completely submerged in, baptized into the higher frequency of love, vibrating in that energy, vibrating in peace and joy, overshadowed with the presence of the Holy Spirit, energizing you, transforming you, changing you. Be open to that overshadowing, for the presence of God to rest upon you.